Kakadosh Boker Or, Bekiim Bahalacha Chodesh Tov, Shavua Tov, Bekiim Bahalacha 2, day 39, page 132, Halacha Yod Aleph. Okay, 11. Even when in the restroom, one must act modestly and not undress until one sits down. Likewise, one should not get up and walk away from the toilet seat until one gets dressed. See the footnote. So 124. In the preface of the Siman, the importance of remaining modest in the restroom is discussed at length. Also, there's debate amongst the poskim whether there's a Torah obligation to be modest or only the Rabbanan, according to the rabbis. Number 125, the Yaakov Yosef brought down suggested the rule forbidding one to undress before sitting down applies only in the restrooms of antiquity, when the common practice was to crouch over the lantern and to sit on a seat. In our times, when the common practice is to sit in the toilet seat, people cannot be expected to undress only after they are seated. Therefore, it is permissible to undress just before sitting down. This is likewise the ruling of Rabbi Shalom Esas. Despite that, there are multiple proofs from the Gemara that even in Talmudic era, common practice in the restroom was to sit on a seat over the lantern. The Afelev discussed this issue at great length, concluding that our sages always sat while defecating. Right? That means everyone always sat down when they were doing number 2. Nevertheless, there's a basis for the leniency regarding how and when to undress, since it's somewhat difficult to undress after one has already sat down. Furthermore, in our restroom, we could lock the door behind us, ensuring privacy, whereas in Talmudic area, the door had no lock. In fact, the Ben Ish Chai wrote that since our restrooms are enclosed and have doors and that can be latched, we no longer must be careful about how we undress while inside. That means nowadays you can do whatever you want inside. Once you're in the washroom and you lock the door, the restroom, that's it. Okay? Fine. Number 12. Okay, Halacha number 12. Halacha number Yudbet 12. Even in complete darkness of night, one must make sure to shut the door of the washroom or the restroom while relieving oneself for the sake of modesty. The reason for this stringency is that some poskim counted modest behavior as one of the mitzvot of the Torah. This is important for everyone, not only Torah scholars. Even so, if there's a very strong stench in the restroom, one may be lenient to leave the door open to allow fresh air to circulate. Okay, the halacha demanding modest behavior applies when one urinates as well. Even if it will be necessary to postpone urinating for a few minutes until one finds a private place, the prohibition about the shukuz is overridden in this case, right, by the need of maintaining one's self-respect. This is especially important for Torah scholars who must be on guard not to give scoffers or ignorant people a reason to belittle Torah scholars lacking basic decency. The need to maintain one's self-respect and protect the Torah's honor certainly overrides the prohibition of Bal Tishaketsu. So let's see the footnote number 126. Okay? 126. So Ben Ish Chai cited the 7 mitzvot katan. Among the poskim who ruled that the necessity of modest behavior is a mitzvah from the Torah. He commented that although other poskim disagreed, listing there's an institution of our sages and an admirable trait for which the nation of Israel is known for, he concluded that we must be very careful about this mitzvah of observance, since there's an opinion that holds that it's mina Torah. 127. The Ben Ish Chai, right on the bottom, the footnote. He says the Ben Ish Chai comes and he ruled that the necessity. Yeah, he comes and he says like this. He says like this. The Ben Ish Chai ruled that the necessity for modesty applies when someone needs to defecate, but no one needs to urinate. When a man feels the urge to urinate, like it is forbidden for him to postpone it at all, even for the sake of being modest. Maran Rishon LeZion challenging this ruling, citing the Talmud relating that how King Shaul went into a cave to relieve himself. Rashi explained that he needed to urinate. Our sages praised Elmaleh profusely for his extreme modesty, explaining that even though he was in complete darkness of the recess of the cave, right, he says he kept the body covered completely, spreading his cloak around himself like a tent, so that he could relieve himself without exposing his nakedness. Although other commentators understood that the King Shaul's need was to defecate in the cave, the simple explanation is Rashi Rabbi is only to urinate. Obviously, then King Shaul took the time to go into the cave and adjust his cloak before he urinated. According to Ben Ish Chai, it was forbidden for him to act in this manner, it seems. The Rishon LeZion wrote that in our time and culture, most people consider it indecent to urinate in view of others. There are places where a person could be fined for this. Meaning, if a person just goes out in public and just, here it is, you can get a fine. There are rights. He says, therefore, there's no prohibition postponing urinating for a short time in order to find a privacy. The need for maintaining one's self-respect will rise the considerations. This ruling in response to Trumat Hadeshen, who added that for this reason, we find that the several Moraim habitually postponed urinating if the urge came during a lecture, and this resulted in being sterile. Right? Likewise, the Gemara relates that when Shemuel needed to urinate while he was delivering a lecture, he instructed his then to stretch a cloth across him so that people would not see him. Although he technically was permitted to urinate in everyone's view, he postponed it until the cloak was stretched in front of him for the sake of extra modesty and out of respect to the study hall. In fact, the Pri Megadim rule that since the prohibition of Bashar Kozul is only institution of Chachamim, it is overridden by the need of maintaining one's self-respect. Therefore, it's permissible to postpone urinating until one finds a private place. This is likewise the ruling of the Mishnah Berurah, the Ruch HaShulchan. Although the ruling of Maran and Shol Tzion is certainly correct, it does not directly contradict the ruling of Ben Ish Chai. They both agree that when one has to choose, as a choice, one must ignore the fact that others are present and urinate without delay, even in view of a woman. If someone can quickly find this private spot to urinate, however, even Ben Ish Chai agrees that one should do so. Right? The story of the king Shaul, just from there, Shol Tzion meant only to explain that it is incorrect to simply turn around on the street and urinate into the wall. And when most cases find a private place, it might just take a few minutes. He was not referring to a case where one urgently needs to urinate immediately, for then he would endanger himself. So if he says he was referring to a case where one he feels a slight urge, right? And in such a case, just postponing for a few minutes, nothing will happen. What about urinal fixtures? The Yigrot Moshe recommended that when someone goes to a men's room, he should use a toilet stall rather than a urinal fixture on the wall. Since he has this choice, it is better to be more modest. If the toilet stalls are all occupied, however, he may use a urinal. When constructing men's rooms in public buildings, barriers should be placed between each urinal to maximize the privacy each one provides. Meaning not just to have the actual urinals, have like these, like partitions in between. Even though, if, like I told you, in many yeshivot, they don't have urinals at all. They only have the stalls. And that's the best thing, obviously, what to do. Halacha Yud Gimel 13. Okay, next page. It is permissible to postpone relieving oneself if this is necessary as part of a medical treatment or examination. Sometimes an examination, they tell you have to hold yourself in. Why? Because we have to drink, and you're holding yourself until finally they tell you, okay, now. So if it's for medicine or any type of, or it's a healing process, you're allowed to. 128, a similar ruling, but the Rukei Chaim responds to Shiraga Meir. Okay, fine. Number 14, right? This is modesty. Technically, the halacha that a man may expose only 2 square tefachim of his body when urinating, and when defecating, 1 tefach. A woman may expose 1 square tefach of her body when voiding. If the person needs to expose more of his body in order to prevent the clothing becoming soiled, he may do so. Nowadays, since are enclosed, right, the person can close and lock the door. We don't have to be stringent about it. That means in the olden days, you could only mamash a little bit down. But if you're going to get dirty, you could. Nowadays, the door's closed. You can do whatever you want. I mean, you don't have to be stringent. 129. The source for the Salacha is the Gemara, where the explanation is given for details. Halacha appears in Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yaakov Castro added that, of course, one may expose a part of the body that sits in the toilet seat. The measurement appears in the Salacha means that expose this much of the body besides the part of the seat. Otherwise, he argued that it would be impossible to avoid soiling one's clothing. The Ben Ish Chai added that since our restrooms are enclosed and have a door, so therefore you could, you don't have to be careful about this. And the Achronim, they agree with this. Number 15, last one. A man must not urinate on the ground while standing, since it's likely that he will urine and splatter back on his legs. So, right? And then they would say that his children are mamzerim. It is permissible if he's standing on something higher than the ground, in front of him, or if he's urinating onto the soft sand. In the restrooms, right, where the hole has been dug for this purpose, it's certainly permissible. The entire issue does not apply to our restrooms with modern toilet bowls and urinals. Men may definitely urinate while standing. There's no problem. Okay, number 130. The Talmud teaches that a man must not urinate standing, since the urine is likely to spatter back in his legs. And people say that his private part was severed, and he's incapable of urinating in a stream like normal men. So if this man has children, so people suspect that his children is somebody else fathered the children, meaning that they're mamzerim. So because of that, the Shulchan Aruch brings this halacha. So obviously nowadays that you have urinals and all these things, there's no problem. But this is all in the olden days. Have a wonderful day, everyone.